I'm Paul Warshauer, born in 1954 in the great city of Chicago. I am a producer, a director, more recently a theater developer, and a restoration consultant.
Okay, can you tell us what is Grand Venues and what do you do as part of the company?
Grand Venues is a corporation. It has two shareholders, Mike Novelli and myself. We formed the company in October of last year to answer a need specifically for the Wheaton Grand Theater here in Wheaton, Illinois. But our mission and our service is now being provided to theaters and individuals, municipalities throughout the United States and in England. It was through my education process that I developed a love for the real estate, because then you could control what goes on inside.
Yeah. And, you know, growing up in Chicago, I mean, what a great area for both live theater with the Steppenwolf and all these theater companies and the shows they do, and the architecture of the theaters. Now, what were some of your favorite theaters growing up?
I remembered as a child, and I still have the bus tokens, that at 10 years of age, and I think it was a little young for me to be traveling by bus by myself, I came up from Belmont and Sheridan. I know I must have taken the 151, and I was either at the Riviera or at the Uptown, and I saw South Pacific in one of those theaters. I know it was one of those two, and you know, I'd have to go back and check. You know, I'm sure somebody has.
Was this the movie or the stage?
This was the movie, and this was out, I think, in the '60s. So whether it was a re-release or first release, but I know I took the bus and I fell in love with this theater. And then we went to the Chicago Theater. My grandparents were wonderful people. They took me to the theater. We saw Aida at the Lyric Opera House. I mean, for then on, you go to the theater to watch the play, but all of a sudden I fell in love with this great architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And
so what is your favorite theater?
There's no question in my mind that for the last 5 years, my favorite theater now and forevermore is the Uptown Theater at Broadway and Lawrence in Chicago, Illinois.
Why did it close? I mean, was it just so big that it got to the point where it was undoable to keep it open? I
think that's the bottom line. It was too big for its time with no parking in a bad neighborhood. 4,400 seats is hard enough to fill as it is. But Jerry Michelson, he and I talked about buying the Riviera Theater, sent me this letter saying, oh, I remember the Uptown. The last time we did anything in there was with Jay Giles in 1988, and there were rats in the basement and the urinals didn't work. I mean, that's a guy who really loves old theaters, don't you think? I mean, I would remember the fact that Phil Collins and the Grateful Dead and all these other people.
So it was used for rock concerts.
Right, but it was also used for Queen for a Day, which very few people even remember, the television show being shot there 1 week a year. It was also used for Spanish language films, and it's massive. It's Balban and Katz's best theater, the two great patriarchs of Chicago theater. But the Uptown has great history like that. We found the first program where they had an orchestra that came up. I mean, my God, it was a full orchestra. They came up on a platform, and they played the Tchaikovsky, and then there was an organ part, and then there was a short subject, a movie, and then the orchestra would go back down again, and then they'd open the curtain. This was 1925. Yeah. And you read the first program, and you think, this is high art, which is what Balaban and Katz created. There were pictures on the wall, allegedly worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is to show that this place, this beautiful thing called the Uptown, was for high art, not for lowbrow art. So in other words, you'd have a live stage show. You'd have famous performers who would appear.
And do you think over the course of the years, I mean, did they show movies there originally?
Well, originally it was a live stage show plus movies in 1925. I mean, the product was movies.
Right.
You know, let's face it, they were in the movie business. But over the years, it became show business. And how do you get 4,000 people in and out of a theater? Fill, spill, refill. You make these massive lobbies, and you walk into the Uptown. It is the most spectacular public space, bar none. I mean, the Vatican is very good, but the Uptown is spectacular. With great respect to our Catholic viewers, the Vatican has another religious significance, but for those of us who love old theaters, it might as well be a type of church. Every one of us has touched it, has turned to crap. I mean, there was a great group that started, they lost out. Then Louis Wolfe bought it, that land banked it. He lost. Kenny, his partner, tried to sell the chandeliers. The good people inside smuggled the chandeliers where they sit today at Barrington Hills, where a sheriff was involved trying to grab the chandeliers, and Jasper Sanfilippo, he'll admit it freely. He's the nut king. He's the guy who invented a machine that processes nuts, which is a metaphor for this whole uptown thing. He has our chandeliers in protective custody. And we have the lawsuit over here that says when a person or persons develop the theater to a significant degree, Mr. Sanfilippo is ordered by the court to put the chandeliers back in. I've never heard of such a deal.
How did you get involved in the fight to save the uptown?
I saw on the front page of the Tribune a guy named Chris Green. What the hell's his last name? This is not going to be nice. I don't remember his name. He's the chief Tribune theater critic. Chris Green. It's not Green. I'm sorry. I'll get it later. I see a front page story about it, and it talks about this massive theater, and something clicks in my mind like, that was the place I saw South Pacific, or I went there as a kid. All of us went there as kids if we lived on the north side. And it's been closed since 1988, and here's a group that was just given $1 million by Albert Goodman. Well, the backstory is more fascinating, is that Goodman himself, we understood, was booted off the board of the Goodman Theater. Wait, he's Albert Goodman, the Goodman Theater. He's booted off the board and put into the honorary board, which is an insult, and evidently he said, what other theater can I help? Andy Pierce, great man, says, well, how about the Uptown? He finds the group, he writes them a check for $1 million and says, be fruitful and multiply. And they spent the $1 million without buying the theater. I got involved later when the money was almost gone, and Carol Carlson and a couple of the other well-meaning people hired me to serve on the board to talk about, parking and real estate, and I did. So I was elected anonymously, or elected in absentia in August. By October, I was elected chairman of the board. Now, Groucho says, beware of a group that will elect you to a member of a club that you shouldn't be a member of. There was nobody on the board that had money, and they were all well-meaning people, and the money was down to about $200,000, maybe less. So I get into this thing at the end and just say, all right, time out. Where's our money? Well, there's $250,000 still in escrow to buy the building. What? And you just let it go? They signed a release on it. So the man who owned the building was Rudy Muldar and a guy named Johnny Truzakis. And these guys it was like lambs to the slaughter. They just took these poor people to the cleaners.
So now how long were you chairman for the Uptown?
I was chairman from October till February, where I was voted off the board by my attorney's request because they were going down. And he says, get yourself voted off. And I said, I want to be voted off, and they obliged. So if you read the press, it seems like they booted me out. I was called the deposed chairman. Well, I deposed myself, and then 3 days later, we formed an LLC called the Uptown Performance Center LLC. I mean, I have more good stuff and bad stuff on the internet. Thank God the internet is only one small part of who we are. I mean, I've got 12 theater projects. We don't even talk about them now because they come after us and they commit what's called tortious interference. They say, oh, be careful of that criminal. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a bad guy. I'm a dreamer like a lot of other guys that want to save theaters. But now we see business models can help save these things.
And that's what
lawyers and accountants who used to be the worst enemies of the theaters now become our best friends.
Right.
You have to have some visionaries on your board. You have to have some people like me. You have to have some little crackpot people. But if the crackpots aren't balanced by my partner who does 10 years of AT&T marketing, and he's a bank, he's got the bank stuff, and you have to balance all the craziness with reality. And some of those people that are grounded are negative. Some of the people like us are positive. Soon you meet in the middle with a neutral. So you see, you make this big orbiting thing, which looks like a giant model, and you find the person that's opposite you on the polar scale. There's only 3 things you bring to a project: wealth, work, or wisdom. The 3 W's. You either bring wealth, which is cash, money, you bring work, which means you've got slave, or you bring wisdom. And you're a consultant, and you've got the ability to bring all the pieces together. That's all. So you want those people to fit into one of those 3 categories when you're building a 501c3 board or an LLC board. Doesn't matter. Got to have wealth, work, or wisdom. It's all so easy. It takes the village to save that theater, but it takes people from the outside to help.